Welcome to The Explainer. Our whole goal here is to break down really big topics into clear, engaging presentations. So let's just dive right in. We usually think of history as this slow, gradual thing, right? It just kind of creeps along. But what if I told you there are these specific moments, these pivot points, where the whole game board just gets reset? Well, today, we're going to explore how one single year, 1492, was basically the bridge between two totally different eras of human history. All right, so to really get the impact of 1492, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to look at the world it actually came from. So try to picture this, a totally fragmented Europe, still reeling from the collapse of the Roman Empire centuries before. We're talking about a time of just widespread chaos. For most people, the main currency wasn't gold, it was just survival. Let's call it the operating system of the early Middle Ages, was this thing called feudalism. See, there was no real central government, so all power was local. Your entire world, your safety, your livelihood, everything. It was all defined by your personal loyalty to some nearby lord who promised to protect you. It was a world of thousands and thousands of tiny, self-contained territories, and every single one had its own ruler and its own set of rules.
Okay, and what's so cool about this is how it shows this massive slow-motion change happening over centuries. Look over on the left. You've got that old feudal world. Your loyalty is to your local lord, period. But then, on the right, something brand new is starting to emerge. It's loyalty to a king, to this bigger idea of a nation. Those private, local armies, they're slowly being replaced by centralized, state-run armies. And all those thousands of tiny little territories, they're starting to merge into fewer, way more powerful states. This, right here, is the foundation of our modern world being laid, piece by tiny piece.
And you can bet this transition was not peaceful. Nope, it was forged in fire. Think about conflicts like the 100 Years' War, which was just brutal, between England and France. They had this completely unexpected side effect. Out of all that chaos, all that constant war, people started to see themselves differently. They weren't just subjects of some local lord anymore. They started to think of themselves as French or English. The very idea of the nation, it was being born. Which brings us right to our pivotal year, 1492. This is the moment where all those trends that had been simmering for centuries, the political consolidation, these new national identities, this growing ambition, they all just finally boil over. And it creates this single, explosive year of change that's going to reshape the entire globe.
And this really illustrates the core idea perfectly. Just look at this timeline. In January, the Reconquista ends. We're talking after centuries of conflict. Ferdinand and Isabella finally conquer Granada, and bam, Spain is unified under one powerful crown. Then, what happens just 9 months later? In October, a sailor from Genoa, you might have heard of him, Christopher Columbus, funded by that exact same newly unified Spanish crown, he reaches the Americas. You see the connection, right? These two events are not separate. Consolidating power at home is exactly what allowed them to project that power abroad.
But, these huge political shifts didn't just happen in a vacuum. They were supercharged by technology. There were two key innovations that acted like massive accelerators, and they basically made the old medieval world, with its local lords and stone castles, completely obsolete.
Okay, first up, gunpowder. Now, for centuries, a lord's big stone castle was the ultimate symbol of power. It was almost impenetrable. He could literally defy a king from behind those walls. But then, all of a sudden, a king shows up with cannons, and he can turn that fortress to rubble in just a few days. This completely shifted the balance of power. It centralized all that military might in the hands of the monarchs, the only ones who could actually afford this expensive new artillery.
And second, and this was just as revolutionary, was the printing press. Think about it. Before this, an idea could only spread as fast as a monk could hand copy a book. But now, you could duplicate and spread ideas with incredible speed. This technology is what allowed the new ideas of the Renaissance, this amazing cultural rebirth focused on science and human reason, to just spread like wildfire all across Europe. It connected minds in a way that had never ever been possible before.
And we're not just talking about beautiful art or impressive architecture here. The Renaissance was a fundamental shift in mindset. It was all about rediscovering the lost knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome, but maybe more importantly, it was about focusing on human potential, on scientific inquiry. It was a brand new, much more confident way for humanity to understand its own place in the universe.
So, okay, what do we have? We've got a newly unified, technologically supercharged Europe. But how did it fit into the rest of the world? Well, the global balance of power was also going through this seismic shift. And Europe wasn't just acting on its own. It was also reacting to some massive pressures coming from the East. And this right here is like a tale of two worlds. Over in the East, you've got the Byzantine Empire. I mean, this is the 1,000-year-old heir to Rome, and it's in a terminal decline. It was a land-based power, ancient and, well, fading. Meanwhile, over in the West, you have these new dynamic national monarchies. They are hungry for expansion, and they're starting to look to the seas as the new way to project their power.
And the final blow to that old order in the East? It came from the rising Ottoman Empire. This was a new, incredibly dynamic power, and it expanded fast. When the Ottomans captured Constantinople back in 1453, it sent absolute shockwaves through Europe. Why? Well, it effectively cut off all the traditional land routes to Asia, which forced kingdoms like Portugal and Spain to start looking for new sea routes, out to the west. So when you put all these pieces together, the consequences of 1492 and all the events around it were immediate, and they were global. First, the modern sovereign state emerged. The easiest way to think of it is a centralized power that has a monopoly on force inside its borders, basically the foundation for the countries we live in today. Next, global trade networks just exploded, shifting from the Mediterranean clean over to the Atlantic. And finally, European influence, for better and for worse, began to spread across the entire globe, setting the stage for the next 500 years of history.
So in the end, you realize the modern world wasn't planned. It wasn't the result of some grand design on a blueprint. It was forged in this crucible of medieval collapse, of fierce competition, and of a stunning rebirth of ideas. And it just goes to show you, sometimes history's greatest leaps forward don't start with order. They start with chaos. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What chaos today is building the world of tomorrow?